Okay, that'll work. Hey friends, I want to talk about how to do bad philosophy. It's a problem that I see a lot when it comes to discussions. It could be over anything. It could be over social issues, it could be over political issues, religious issues. But it's one thing I've noticed and something that I want to point out because I think it leads to very bad intellectual habits. And to segue into that, I want to talk about a peculiar objection to Christianity or Islam or any religion. Namely, the objection that it seems just to be a matter of coincidence which religion is right. Because anybody who is born into a religion believes that religion to be right, then it just seems awfully coincidental that the religion you're born into is the correct one. Now, we can tackle this argument in two ways. One would be to take it how it is normally applied in an everyday use, and the other is to strengthen it as best as we can. The best way to formulate this argument is to have it be a matter of undermining somebody's justification for their belief. So if they believe, for example, that Christianity is true, you can point out, well, you only believe that because you were raised in a Christian household, and that's not a justified reason to hold that belief. You can't claim to know what you're saying if you only believe it because of that reason. And that's true, at least I think it is. That would require a separate video. But the way it is used in everyday parlance is usually easily refutable. For example, that something is true does not depend on the reason you hold that belief. For example, in a few hundred years BC, if you were born in ancient Greece, you most likely would believe that the earth was round. But on the other hand, if you were born in the Middle East during that time, you most likely would have believed the earth was flat. Now, assume you're a Greek merchant or traveler and you're traveling along the Silk Road, or I'm not a history major, I don't know if that existed at the time, but you're traveling as a merchant and you come across a Middle Eastern merchant. And y'all talk about the shape of the world like people do, I guess. And he asks what you believe, and you say, I believe the earth is round. Now, if the Middle Eastern merchant told you that, well, you only believe that because you were born in Greece, what would you say? I would think you would say something along the lines of, maybe, but so what? It doesn't matter where I was born. What matters is whether or not the earth is round or flat. And we have empirical observations and we have mathematical demonstrations that show that the earth is round, not flat. Where I'm born is a secondary matter. That's a historical example of why this argument kind of falls on its face. A proposition's truth value isn't determined by how one came about to hold that proposition. But let's say it does. Let's just assume for the sake of argument that this objection actually holds up. But by that very same logic, atheism or secularism would be false. Because just like a religious identity, whether or not you are atheist can be largely predicted by where you were born, what time you lived in, the income level of your family, and a bunch of other variables that we can use. So if somebody says theism is false and atheism is true, if I were to apply this logic to them, I could just say, well, you only believe that because you were born in the 21st century and in a first world country and you're middle class or upper middle class. But you might be thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense, because whether or not theism is true or atheism is true is not determined by how one came about to hold that proposition. And I would agree. I'm just saying that if you take this argument for what it stands for and apply it to its own self, it's self-defeating. It constitutes an objection to itself. But like I said, I bring all this up to talk about a larger point, namely how to do philosophy badly. Now, there are a lot of ways to do philosophy badly, myself included. I know a lot of ways from personal experience of what I've done. But as I hinted in the objection we were considering, this is a very popular way to do philosophy badly, namely to believe in this type of argument. I don't know where this idea comes from. I'll just take a random guess based on what I've studied. And it seems that it has dripped down from Marxist academic circles into the general pop culture. Now, what do I mean? Well, if you look into Marx and Engels' 1845 work, The German Ideology, Marx talks about his materialist conception of history, colloquially known as historical materialism. And the main theme of Marx's point is that human life can be structured into two bases. You have the ideological superstructure, and at the base, you have the level of material production and social relations. Marx's thesis is that as things in the production level change, that affects change in the ideological superstructure. I'll give you an example of Marx describing his materialist conception of history from the German ideology. This conception of history depends on our ability to expound the real process of production, starting out from the material production of life itself as the basis of all history, to explain all the different theoretical products and forms of consciousness, religion, philosophy, ethics, etc., and trace their origins and growth from that basis. It does not explain practice from the idea, but explains the formation of ideas from material practice. And accordingly, it comes to the conclusion that all forms and products of consciousness cannot be dissolved by mental criticism, but only by the practical overthrow of the actual social relations which gave rise to this idealistic humbug. That, and focus here, not criticism, but revolution is the driving force of history. Plugging my computer back. It's the type of philosophy that thinks if you can explain what non-rational factors may have led someone to hold a belief, then you have thereby refuted that belief. For followers of Marx, whether that be actual communists, critical theorists, or Twitter users, this philosophy becomes reduced to the following proposition. If I can point out what non-rational factors may have led someone to hold a belief, then I have refuted that belief. Is this what Marx actually taught? I'm definitely going to say no. At least it's a much more nuanced point, but this is what a lot of people actually believe. And this is my guess as to why it has become so popular. So besides this religious example, what are some other examples of this type of argumentation? Well, I'm involved in a lot of pro-life work, and in discussions around abortion, you usually hear from the pro-choice side that pro-lifers are only pro-life because they want to control a woman's body. Now, is it the case that there may be 3 or 2 or 1 people on the pro-life side that really have this thing for wanting to control half of the population's bodies? I mean, maybe. But that has nothing to do with whether or not the arguments offered by the pro-life side actually hold any logical or rational weight. In my own case, and I know for a lot of other people, they come to be against abortion usually from 2 reasons. Ethical and philosophical considerations of when personhood begins, and religious reasons. But this all amounts to bad philosophy. If you think you can refute somebody's rational position, and when I say rational, I mean it can either be true or false, right? It's making a philosophical claim or a scientific claim or what have you. If you think that you can refute that proposition just by pointing out why or a motive as to why somebody holds that proposition, then you haven't refuted it. It could be the case that an evil person says the worst things, but it could also be the case that one of those things he says is true. It is rationally true, and you can't discount it just because that person is evil. Is the question as to why somebody holds a belief important? I mean, definitely. It has historical importance, it has biographical importance. In a court of law, you have to figure out motives underlying what people say. And that's all important. But when it comes to philosophical issues, it's an inferior question. The primary question, and if you take anything away from this, know this, that the primary question of philosophy is it true? That is what it's about. It doesn't matter who said it. It doesn't matter why a person said it. It doesn't matter when or where they said it. Is it true or not? That should be the question. What so many people see instead is a battlefield where different power structures and different wills to power are trying to assert themselves under the guise of rational debate. That's a critical component of, say, Nietzsche, of, say, Marx, or critical theory. But then you have to approach Marx, you have to approach Nietzsche, you have to approach critical theory and ask, what you're saying, is it true? Is it true that there are all these competing wills to power in rational discussions? These philosophies can't escape it. It is the philosophical question. It is what everything in philosophy is pointed towards. Is it true? Or is it not? But lastly, on a Christian level, if somebody comes up to you and you're not a Christian, and they are, and they're trying to convert you, I would advise not to look at it as some power structure play at here. Instead, you should ask yourself, is what they're saying true? Or is it not? Is Christianity true? Is Islam true? Is Hinduism? Is Buddhism? Is Taoism? Is Zen? Is Jainism? Are all these true or false? Are some more true than others? And why is there a discrepancy there? These are the more important questions. Focus on truth. But I hope this has led to some consideration over the matter, and I think it would benefit a lot of people, you included, if we oriented these deep conversations to the primary question. Is it true or is it not? Thank you. Please keep me in your prayers. You are in mine, and God love you.